Hi, this is Lupe Prado. I am a career and life coach, and you're listening to Paid Vocation. In this podcast, I'll be sharing real stories of people who are doing work they love to help you find work that you love, whether that's a new role at your current company, switching careers completely, or starting a business. And if you're already doing work that you love, this podcast will be a place that you can come back to feel supported and uplifted. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, thank you so much for being here today.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I think they asked us all this when I was in kindergarten, and there's a really little painting where they did our little footprint, and I put it on the wall, and then they wrote like, when I grew up, I want to be, and kindergarten me said, I want to be a mommy, which is super cute. I'm not a mom yet, but hopefully soon. And I think I had a lot of really great role models growing up in my family, definitely my own mom. And so I don't know, whenever I walk by that little painting, it just brings me so much happiness.
Oh, that's so sweet. I'm about to have a kindergartner, so that's so tell me, how do you think that connects, that wanting to be a mom, to what you do today?
That's a good question. I think the wanting to be a mom part just came from really wanting to find a way to care for others. And I think that in medicine, I came from work. My day job is as a doctor. I did not have time to change. That's why I'm wearing a very attractive overlarge scrub shirt. I think as a doctor, that's what you're doing for people, caring in and day out. And you're treating their blood pressure and you're treating their diseases and things like that. But a big part of my job in anesthesia is connecting with people in pre-op, making them feel safe and comfortable in my care. And I think that feeling of really feeling safe and cared for is one of the most important things that I can hopefully give to my patients. I feel like that caring aspect is really at least what I see a big part of motherhood as.
I love that. Well, and tell me, was it a straight path to becoming a doctor? And we're going to dive into your book and writing the book in a second, but I'm curious, did you follow that all the way through? Did you figure that out in college? When did you know you wanted to follow the path to being a physician?
I feel like some doctors have this eureka moment where they just knew that they had to be a doctor or else. But for me, I was always good at science growing up. I really liked writing as well. But as a kid, I think I internalized early on, I don't have a specific memory of when, but just that writing as an author for fun was not the most financially stable career path, and that I probably should go to college for something that's just a little bit more reliable. So I went into college thinking about being a pre-med, but didn't really know about a lot of other careers, and then ended up becoming an EMT my freshman year of college, and really, really liked the clinical hands-on aspect of helping people, even more than the science part that I was already sort of drawn to. And so from there, it was a pretty straight shot. I took a planned gap year to when I took my MCAT and worked in consulting for a little bit. And I did my MBA in medical school just because I was always interested in sort of the business side of medicine as well. But definitely, I would say from freshman year of college, I knew that I wanted to be a doctor.
And when did you know as an anesthesiologist?
Yeah, good question. It's definitely the best specialty. So anyone listening to medicine, follow me to the land. In my second year, so you do 4 years of medical school. Anyone unfamiliar with the very weird American training system, you do 4 years of medical school, after which you receive your MD degree and you're a doctor. But then in order to practice, you do a residency, which is sort of like an apprenticeship program where you train under more experienced physicians. So in my second year of medical school, I rotated in the ICU, and I really liked how intense everything was, how you had to think quickly, how all of the organ systems interconnected, and how the blend of medicine, which is really like the thinking part, and also surgery, which is really the procedures and the hands-on part. And then when I did anesthesia a couple months later, I realized that anesthesia in the OR is really doing all of those same things, just at like a hyper speed, so much faster than the ICU moves. And I realized I found my place.
Wow. I hadn't heard it described that way. So I'm curious, how did you decide to write a book?
Well, as I mentioned, I've always loved to write, like as a kid. I think my first technical book was on a stack of Post-its that my parents kept, and it was called The Dog Who Ate Cat Food and the Cat Who Ate Dog Food. That was like the entire plot right there in the title. But that was my first book when I was like 3. So I always wrote as a kid. When I was in elementary school, I wrote these, I guess you'd call them like middle grade fantasy novels that my parents would then take to Kinko's and get published by getting them back which was really cute. And then I would subject my adult family to them. I sort of wrote and didn't really take it that seriously throughout high school and most of college. And in medical school is a little bit of a pressure cooker, residency even more so. But I think I was spending so much time and energy trying to learn medicine, and I really needed some sort of creative outlet. I've always liked physical exercise as a decompression, but I needed something that I could do when I was physically tired too. And so I got back into writing and then decided to try and take it more seriously. And what that looked like for me was reading a bunch of books on craft, getting some beta readers, seriously workshopping my manuscripts, and trying to get an agent.
Oh, wow. Okay, so your book is it's called Wedding Issues. I'm currently reading it and I love it.
Yay.
And it's fun. And as I found you on Instagram, you're a Zibby book author. And so I've had a couple of Zibby book authors on the podcast. I started following you. I thought, I think she's a physician. And she wrote a book. How did she have time to do that?
That is definitely something I get a lot. For the most honest answer is I don't really know how time, and I probably don't get as much sleep as I should. But writing is just something that I really, like I said, I started to take seriously in medical school, and I just decided that it was a non-negotiable for me. And I was going to find a way to write even in my crazy job and with my crazy hours. And so what that looked like for me was being really, really creative about how and where I write. So I actually write a lot of my first drafts sometimes from the operating room in the notes app on my phone if I have downtime. Wow. Because I realize I'm sitting right now in our home office, and my ideal writing situation is being here, my cozy blanket with candle going, and I can sit here and write for hours, which is great. But if I waited for the perfect conditions, I would write once or twice every 6 months. So ideally, I would get to do that all the time, but getting to do this other really important, fulfilling job as a physician means that I have to get creative about how I fit my writing in.
Wow. I started this podcast and I called it Paid Vocation because I used to be an accountant and then pivoted, and I was not fulfilled in that role. And my strengths really lie with people. And I love people, love connecting. It's part of the reason I do this podcast is because I love getting to learn about people and their stories. And I wanted to motivate people to follow work, to do something they love. And so as I heard you say, become an anesthesiologist because that's the best. I thought, because I guess I was assuming that maybe you wanted to transition out of being a physician to become a full-time writer. I guess that was just an assumption.
Some days I feel like that.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe, yeah. But I just thought it was interesting that you're doing this while you're a physician or you're a doctor. And then you also have mentioned a couple of times that you find this work really important and fulfilling. So how do you think about that in your head? I know you said it's non-negotiable. So for me, it was coaching. So I eventually figured out that I wanted to work with people, and that's what I get to do now. And I love it. Is that the same thing for you? Or do you see a path where you continue doing both? Or maybe that's TMI? I don't know.
No, it's a great question. So I think sometimes I come home from work and I'm extremely burned out. And I think part of that is just sort of the stage in my career as a physician that I'm in right now. I'm in residency, which is that intense apprenticeship period. I'm finishing up year 2 of 4, and I have essentially no control over my hours. I'm physically in the hospital close to 60 hours a week. I do prep work for cases the night before. On top of that, I take call shifts. My sleep schedule's messed up. I work weekends. It's disruptive for my social life, my family life, and I don't have agency over it. I'm not choosing to take these call shifts. I'm not getting paid doctor money for this. You don't make attending money until what people think of as physicians earning until you're finished with residency. So there's a lot of tough parts about working so much. And so I think a lot of my burnout currently relates to sort of that stage in my training. I joke right now that I really like what I do. I just wish I did less of it per week. And when I'm an attending, I will be able to choose what job I take. And there are plenty of anesthesia jobs where you work 30, 40 hours a week or even fewer. I think that part of what drew me to anesthesia as a field, in addition to sort of the medicine surgery thing I talked about, was that it's a very flexible field and you do have that ability to blend medicine with other things in life. I think for many of us, many physicians, it becomes your entire identity that you're a doctor, and you hang out with other doctors and you talk medicine at your dinner parties and you just never get outside this bubble. And so for me, what's really important is having a life where I can have an expansive life outside of the hospital. And I think writing right now, it's difficult to find time to do that, but it's so important to me that I get these little trickles now. And then I think about when I'm done with residency, how excited I am to give so much more time to writing.
Yeah. So it seems like it's not an either or in your mind.
Yeah, as I think as much intrinsic joy as writing gives me, when I get someone through a tough surgery, or I save someone's life, or I get a breathing tube in someone who would have died if I were not standing there, those are really powerful moments. And there's sometimes a lot of BS in between that you have to put up with at work, like at any job. But those moments are really, really special. And they're not moments that I had when I worked as a consultant. They're not moments that most of my colleagues from my MBA program experienced in their job. I'm working in the ICU this month. Today, we had a gentleman who has been in the hospital for like 2 months, very critically ill. Sometimes when people are ill for that long, we end up having to put a breathing tube in their throat instead of in their mouth, because you can't have one in your mouth for very long. And when you do that, you can't talk, which is really distressing, of course. It's hard for him to communicate with me as his doctor, with his family, with his wife. But today, we were able to change it to a smaller tube with a valve so he could talk. So I've taken care of this man for 3 weeks. Today was the first time that I was able to have a real conversation with him. And he's got like tears in his eyes. He kept trying to offer me a discount at like the auto shop where he worked, which was very sweet. My car is really crappy, so I might have to take him up. But I dealt with a lot of other crap at work today, but like that moment that I'm still happy thinking about right now, like those are the times where it's like medicine is just, it truly is an honor to be able to be a physician. And those are the times where I'm like, that's why it's not either or for me. They both bring me this different type of joy.
Well, that's making me think of so I do executive coaching, I do career coaching. And sometimes when people are trying to figure out what they want to do, if they're wanting to pivot or if they're wanting to figure out what's next, they'll mention different interests. And I remember coaching someone who had two very different interests. She was trying to figure out, well, which one do I choose? Which path do I go? It doesn't make sense. They don't go together. And she ended up figuring out a way to do both. And that's what she does. And she's very happy. So I think in our mind, a lot of the time, it can be this like black or white thinking about our careers.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is that false dichotomy if you can only do one of these things, or that you can do both of them full time, or that's why it's an either or. Like for me, specifically for writing, I don't need to quit medicine and write 40 hours a week to get the fulfillment and joy from writing. I think if I did that, it would put a lot more pressure on me to produce manuscripts and get them sold and all those things. I feel like right now, because I'm a resident, everyone's like shocked that I wrote a book. So it's be good. They're just impressed with the book. Like, the standards on the ground. I quit my job and I was like, I'm a writer. People are going to expect like, all right, you're writing lots of really good books. So, you got to manage expectations.
Keep expectations low and you'll exceed.
Exactly. Under promise, over deliver.
Well, and I heard you say, I think you said in medical, you started really kind of getting serious about writing or making it a big part of your life. And you said you worked on manuscripts with an S. So Wedding Issues, your book that just came out, is not your first completed book?
No, this is where the fairy tale evaporates, that it's all been very easy. Wedding Issues was actually my third manuscript that I wrote. And when I say wrote, these are not things that I just dashed off. Like manuscripts that I wrote, I revised many, many times. My agent and I revised. We really put a lot of effort into polishing these into the shiniest gems we could make them. So the first manuscript that I wrote in medical school, I did all the things I talked about, really read some writing books, worked with beta readers, did all these things. It did get me an agent, which is an accomplishment. It's hard to get an agent even. Yeah. So that was a win. But that book did not find a home with a publisher. No one wanted to publish it, which is still very sad. Wrote another one. Spent another year on that. No one bought that one either. It was very sad. And then I wrote Wedding Issues. And the original title of Wedding Issues actually was Southern Charmer, because the main character is very persuasive and charming. And the book is set in Tennessee, and that's a big part of the identity of the book, is that's very Southern. So it's a cute little title. And I remember as I finished writing the first draft, I was like, I can't keep doing this. This is taking so much out of me to put myself out there and all these rejections. So I was like, if this one doesn't sell, I can't do this anymore. So I made the last line of that book third time's the charm, which I was like, this is cute because the title, but also because it's my life and I can't keep doing this. So it doesn't sell. I don't know if I'm going to keep going. That I always like to talk about, because certainly before I got an agent or before I even sold a book, it seemed like everyone else was just gliding along towards their goal. And for me, at least, the road to get there was paved with many, many, many rejections.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think you're maybe almost even being humble about getting the agent, because I've had authors on the podcast and that getting the agent is almost harder than getting
No,
the
it's
book
really tough. No,
accepted.
I got 81 agent rejections.
Oh my God.
I have them all saved, all of them. Yeah, it was tough.
Wow.
It was tough,
Wow.
but it was hard because on the way I had people offering phone calls and like revision. It was so many times I like almost got an agent and then something happened. And then so it was a brutal year. And my husband was like my boyfriend at the time. I would tell him how bad the stats were. I think my current agent signs like 1 or 2 new clients a year and gets hundreds of submissions every week she's open to subs. He's very mathematical and scientific, and he's just like, why are you doing this? It's like buying lottery tickets. And I'm like, well, because if it works, I'll be so happy. He like did not understand. And then when finally the yes did come, it was definitely worth it to get there. But it's hard when you're in the trenches because you don't know for sure that that yes is going to come.
Yeah, for sure. I think I had another author on the podcast who said you have to get at least 100 rejections to know that you're trying hard enough for an agent or something. So you did good. You were below the 100.
Writing is you really just have to get used to constant rejection. And then when I was querying in that stage of trying to get an agent, I would read online, people would say, being on submission, the process of when you have an agent trying to then sell your manuscript to a publisher, they would say that being on submission was worse than trying to get an agent. And I would sit there and be like, how can it be worse? Those people, they have agents, I don't even have an agent. I'll be so mad about it. And then I got to that stage and 2 of my books that I worked on for like a year each got killed within weeks. And I was like, okay, they're right. This is
now they're rejecting your baby.
Exactly. It's a piece of your heart that goes out there. And so even though to you it feels like a creative endeavor, which it is, to them, they're evaluating it for its commercial appeal. Sure. So that's really what you have to remember. And I say that as I never remember that when it's me, but it's easy to say that now that I don't have a book on submission.
And tell me, how did you land on Zibby books? Because the authors that I have met from Zibby, I've read the books. They're amazing. I just had Amy Lynn on the podcast, and that book
so gorgeous.
Is beautiful and heartbreaking. And she's just so lovely. And Alicia Fernandez Miranda, Meg Tatey. So they're just like these amazing writers.
I know.
And so I'm like, oh, she's a Zibby author. She's going to be a good person.
No, I'm in very good company there. I'm very lucky. So unlike the first 2 times where, like I said, I just got a bunch of rejections and the books died, when Wedding Issues went out, Zibby actually reached out pretty quickly, like within a week or 2, with a very, what they call a preempt, so like a generous offer to try and get you to withdraw the book from other publishers, which is what my agent and I ended up doing because we were excited. We had a video call with Zibby and I think Kathleen, one of the editors. And it was interesting because at that point, it was September. I signed in September 2022. And Alicia's book came out in February 2023. So Zibby hadn't even published a book yet. So we were like really nice. But I really liked everything she said about trying to give more agency and power back to authors in the publishing industry. I really liked the idea of signing with like a women-owned, women-backed company. And I just really liked Zibby and their vision for the book. So that part at least was very much fairy tale-like. And I also remember I was on night shift that week. My agent emailed me and it was a weekend. So I was like on normal hours. And then she's like, okay, we're going to set up a call. And it's really hard for me to do calls during business hours because I can't ever take calls. But I was like, okay, I'm on nights. This is great. So it's like a 10 a.m. call. So I came home from night shift, went to bed for 3 hours, woke up, was like totally groggy.
Zombie.
But we had the call, but you don't really say on the call if they're going to buy it or not. It was just like nice. So we have the call. And then I'm like, I'm never going to go back to sleep. Like, I'm so excited. So I emailed my agent and I was like, okay, like, let me know as soon as you hear. And I went back to bed. And then I woke up at 4 p.m. to the email that they were offering on the book. And I was so excited. So great.
Yeah. That's awesome. What have you learned through the process of writing this book about yourself?
I have learned a lot of things. About myself, I have been impressed with my own, I guess, capacity for resilience. Before this, I guess, I have not thought of myself as a particularly resilient person or unresilient, I guess, just sort of average. But sometimes I feel like the more that I talk to people about how difficult it is to both make time for this in medicine, but also to keep going after so many rejections, you have something about your life that you don't realize is notable until someone else reflects it back to you. So I think that's something that I'm proud of, is how I've continued to make time for this over the last couple of years, even as residency has gotten a lot more intense. So I think that's definitely something that I've learned about myself.
Yeah. And I mean, it's quite a feat to get a book published. Well, one, to get an agent, right? As you said, get it picked up and get it published. You're in year 2 or year 3 of residency?
Finishing year 2. I'm year 2 right
Year
now.
2. Yeah. So I remember I had a good friend who, when she was in residency, she would tell me like she would eat a granola bar in the bathroom while she was going to go to the restroom because she just didn't have time to even eat lunch because
Yeah.
residency is brutal.
Yeah, sometimes it's like that. I thought people were exaggerating when I was a med student. And, not to act like we're chained to the walls for 100 hours a week or anything, but there are rotations that are like I had a 24-hour shift on Saturday in the ICU where I was taking care of 12 ICU patients by myself, and I did not sit down for 24 hours. These people are like sick. So you're physically doing things, procedures, tasks for them, and you're thinking really hard the whole time. And it's a lot of pressure because these are sick people and they're depending on you. So I think the pressure of residency it can be really tough sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's next for you as you think? Is there another book in you? Are you?
There are so many books. I'm working on 2 different books right now, both of which are a little closer to home in that they're both about medicine, kind of.
I was wondering if you would write about doctors.
Yeah. So now I think I've read enough books where they're set in hospitals or about doctors by people who clearly are not working in healthcare that it just annoys me. So, God, I gotta write a really true to life one. But I think long term, I would really like to write both sort of light beach reads like wedding issues, but also thrillers. So I'm working on the light beach read one is about a plastic surgery resident who is competing for her like patriarchy incarnate co-chief for a really coveted fellowship position spot. So there's a lot of like the same sort of sabotage from wedding issues, but in a hospital setting. And that one's been really fun to write because I don't even have to think of funny sitcom scenarios. I just use things that happen to me and my friends in real life. And we parents didn't know anything. That's
awesome. Oh, I'm excited.
And then the other one is also medical, but a thriller. This one is sort of, Agatha Christie, like the old school. So she wrote And Then There Were None or Mousetrap, a bunch of other books. But anyway, she sort of originated like the concept of like group of people goes to remote area, gets cut off from society, start dying. That trope in the literature is like, thank you. Like Ruth Ware keeps writing these books. Lucy Foley keeps writing these books. We all bow at the altar of Agatha Christie. Anyway, it's similar to that. It's about 7 doctors who are invited to a remote desert retreat. When they get there, they're cut off from society, and then one of them turns up dead, and they realize they all share a connection to a past patient and that they've all broken the Hippocratic oath of do no harm.
Ooh.
I'm really excited about that one too.
That's awesome. And I can see your joy as you talk about them.
Yeah, no, I really do like talking about the books. I will say the other thing, I was laughing to myself when you asked what I learned, because this isn't really about myself, but one thing I have learned publishing a book is that I should not get attached to my own titles because publishers pretty much always change them. So now I don't even title them in my head. When I'm pitching them like this to you, I need a title, but I don't even think of it anymore.
Yeah, well, I think the title I have here in front of me for those who are listening on the podcast and not on video, but it's so cute. It's catchy. Wedding Issues. Yeah. And my sister's getting married. So I was reading it on the plane ride to her bachelorette party. And I'm like, issues. And then it's magazines. And I'm like, oh, that's so catchy.
We went back and forth for so long on the title until we came up with Wedding Issues, to the point that I was starting to question if we would ever like find something that we all liked. And then someone said Wedding Issues, and we were like, oh, yes, that's so yes, Wedding Issues.
Yeah. And I remember when I was working on this podcast in 2020, when just starting to launch it, I was so hung up on the name. I polled all my friends. Well, I had a copywriter, a friend who came up with like 10 titles based on what I wanted it to be about. And then I just sent it out to all my friends and family. Which one do you like best? And I guess the coach in me realizes is that I was trying to get validation from like, I was hoping that everyone would pick one title. That would be the title. And then that would guarantee that my podcast would be successful. That's what I was trying to get from the perfect title.
Probably what I would have done too.
So it's kind of nice that you don't have control over it or that you don't have the final say, because I'm sure it's nice to be able to talk through.
Yeah, I've realized that the title and the cover also are just completely marketing decisions. And it really is this weird industry where you take something that is a creative piece of art that you have created, and then now you are handing it off to someone else intentionally so that they can commercialize it. And there is going to be some changes along the way, and especially in the things that they use to promote, which are the title and the cover. It is so interesting talking to other authors about this because so many people have that same similar experience where, especially for your first book, you're just so emotionally invested in your title. And then you realize that they're going to name whatever they're going to name.
You're just like, I'm just grateful it's out there. And I found it at the,
Someone's reading it. That's all I can.
Well, and I found it at the Dallas airport. So I'm sure that must be a really cool feeling to
People
like.
send me, I don't know why, but the airport just feels so legit. Every time people send me one from the airport, makes me so happy. And I think the airport is one of those few remaining bastions of like true book sales because people still buy books for airplanes. Whenever
100%.
planes invest in real Wi-Fi, the airport Hudsons are going to take a big hit because people are buying books for their plane rides.
Yes. And because those bookstores are usually really small, or it's like a snack store with a limited shelf.
Yeah.
It's like they're not just going to put every book on the market in their shelves.
That's coveted shelf space, you know.
Yeah.
I'm at Hudson News in multiple airports. That's all I've ever wanted.
You've arrived.
This is it.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. How can people learn more about you, follow you, and buy your book?
I think the best way is probably Instagram. If you're on Instagram, my handle is at l.evans.books, and that's L like my name, E-L-L-E. I also have a website. I'm not that good about updating it, but it's ellevansbooks.com. And you can buy wedding issues at many airports, but you can also buy it pretty much anywhere books are sold, certainly on the big ones like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but at a lot of indie bookstores as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this show. I hope that you found the episode helpful. And if you like the show, please subscribe and don't forget to rate and review. I'd also love to connect on Instagram. Send me a DM. I'm at Lupe Prado Coaching. I'll talk to you soon.